G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of Chris Rankin's Music Crush. Today I'm going to do a very special one. Today I'm ranking the studio albums of my favourite non-metal band of all time and pretty close to my favourite band of all time, Rush. They are certainly up with my favourite metal bands, but yeah, definitely my favourite non-metal band of all time. Mostly known as a prog rock band, but they have delved into all sorts of other genres close to the prog rock, hard rock, pop rock sort of genres. I have all of their studio albums, all 19 studio albums, so I'm going to rank them. I was going to just show the whole discography, but I thought, no, you can always just look that up, so I thought maybe I'll do a ranking, and that way if you don't know Rush so well, it'll help you work out what to look for. Now, a quick disclaimer. None of their albums I dislike. There's only one album that is below 7 out of 10. Just. All the other albums are at least 8 to 8.5 out of 10. And over half of them, and I'll when I get to that point, I'll tell you, at least over half of them, well over half of them, I would put above 9 out of 10. The last sort of 8 or 9 albums are very hard to split, and number one generally is always my number one, only just though, and it's because of it has a couple of my all-time favourite songs on there that will always keep it at number one. But that top section of their albums, I have interchanged over time. I do interchange as far as their order at times, depending on how I'm feeling and the mood I'm in. Some of their catalogue is extremely prog rock and really involved, and others is more pop rock and sort of more on the catchy side of things, so depending on how I'm feeling. I'll try not to spend way too long on each album. They have 19 studio albums starting in 1974, so I'll try not to spend way too long on each album, otherwise the video will just be way too long. So stick with me. I'll start at the bottom and work my way to number one, so you're gonna have to stay to the end to see which is my favorite Rush album of all time. As I say, they started in 1974 in Toronto, Canada. They've only ever had one lineup change. John Rutsey was the original drummer. He only featured on the first debut album, and then after that, Neil Peart, may he rest in peace, joined the band, and they have forever had that same lineup as a three-piece for all that time. Unfortunately, I never got to see them live. They never came to Australia. And even though they've got a decent following in Australia, I can still remember in the 80s and in the 90s, very, very hard to get their albums. Quite often you had to get them on an import. They weren't just available on the rack. So that could be part of the problem. By that stage, they were already doing a big arena concerts. So perhaps they were always worried that they wouldn't be able to sell out those shows in Australia, and in particular Perth. And then a band of that size with that sort of stage show and all, you probably couldn't put them to doing a small, pub gig or tavern, or even a small sort of club gig. So I guess that's maybe why, I don't know. I got into Rush when I was very little. I first started hearing Rush played around the house, dad, uncle, so forth, when I was very little. Would have been only about 3 or 4 years of age. 2112 was the first Rush album I heard, and I was a very big fan ever since. I didn't hear it when it first came out, but I did hear it sort of in the late 70s and was a massive fan. Very big. I loved it right from the start. I always loved, even though I didn't really understand what those terms were back then, I always loved their mix of intricate, progressive songs with great stories, but they always seemed to be catchy and addictive, and songs that they were great, yes, but you just wanted to hear, you wanted to listen to and hear and sing along to. That perfect blend of intricate complex, incredibly written music that was extremely listenable and catchy and head bopping and head banging at times as well. The perfect blend for me. Very sad when I heard about Neil Peart passing away. I was very sad on that day. The Professor, a magnificent band, the Holy Trinity, just so good. Dirk Lurkst Pratt, just the best. So I'll start on my countdown. So coming in at number 19, this is the only album, I don't dislike it, but it's the only album that I would put probably below 7 out of 10, and it's a big jump up after that. And I'm talking about the album Presto, 1989 album. This is their 13th album. So they'd just gotten through their big era of synth pop, rock pop, all that sort of stuff in the 80s. So they wanted to strip it back and go for something that was sort of back to basics and just a straight rock album. I don't dislike this album. I mean, it's got some good songs on here. Chain Lightning is a brilliant song. I like The Pass very much. It's very stripped back. I just find that there's not many hooks or things that catch me in this and bring me back to the album. And it's, for me, it's the least Rush sounding album. It just sounds like many other bands doing a rock album in what did I say this was, 1989. It's a very, it just sort of blended into the crowd too much for me, which no other Rush album ever has. Still a very good album. If this was the only thing they ever did, I'd probably like it a bit more, but when I compare it to the rest of their catalogue, that's why it's 19th. Next, coming in at number 18, have Test for Echo. This is their 1996 album. This was almost their last album that they ever did. Not long after this album, of course, Neil Peart had two major tragedies in his life. He lost his daughter, first of all, and then that was in 1997. So this came out in 1996. He lost his daughter in 1997, and then he lost his wife in 1998. So the band actually went on a 5-year hiatus, which turned out to be a 5-year hiatus from the end of this album until the next one. This is their 16th album. I've got to try and remember where I'm up to in the countdown, but also the albums in their order. So a good album, really good album. Driven is a fantastic song. The title track, Test for Echo, really good song. Lots of good stuff on here, for sure, and a big step up from my 19th on this list. Yeah, really good. So all the albums from this one in are definitely well and truly above sort of 8.5 out of 10, for sure. Coming in at number 17, we have Roll the Bones, 1991. This is their 14th album. Great album, quite different. They actually dabbled in rap on the title track, Roll the Bones. There's a bit of a rap section in there. Dreamline, great song. Bravado, absolutely brilliant song. They'd be my 3 favourites on this album. A very good track, quite different. They were a little bit disheartened and disappointed by Presto, so they changed a little bit of their style. They changed the way they recorded some things and their approach, and Getty even talks about how they felt quite invigorated and rejuvenated when doing this album, just because of a very different approach to recording. So a very good album. Bit of a maligned album in their discography. I know some Rush fans really don't like that album at all, but no, I think it's a good album. I think it's a great album. Next, coming in at number 16, Hold Your Fire. Now, I know some Rush fans just completely do not like this album at all. I really love this album. I think it's a great album. Definitely their most synth pop rock album for sure. Show you the vinyl there. Fantastic. Really, really catchy album. Just absolutely, it's amazing. When they did prog rock, they were the masters of that, and then they came into the 80s and did their pop rock and the synth pop, and they mastered that as well. There's so many great hooks, and there's still people sort of, I think they miss it or forget it or something, but there's still lots of good Alex Lifeson guitar riffs on here. It's still a decent, heavy enough album. Force 10, a really rockin' track that starts off. My favourite song on here is Time Stands Still, which is just brilliant. It's one of the best 80s pop rock catchy chorus songs of all time. They had Amy Mann do some vocals on that track. The only time they've ever had a female do any vocals on any song. So she came in. There was a big push with a music video for that song too, Time Stands Still. So good. And Prime Mover, they'd be my 3 favourite songs on Hold Your Fire. This came out 1987, and this would be their 12th album. So yeah, right. Oh, as I drop one. Right, well, up to next, number 15. Their last ever album that they would record, Clockwork Angels. Try and get rid of the glare there a little bit. Clockwork Angels. This came out in 2012. Their 19th album overall, and yes, this would end up being their last ever album that they made. Some of you may think a bit surprised that I have this low. And now, remembering, as I said, I love everything that Rush has done. It's still a very, very excellent album. It's probably just that overall I've had the least amount of time with this album. Maybe it will climb eventually. I know 9 years sounds like that's a long, but some of these albums I've known for 40 years. So a very good album. Headlong Flight is fantastic. Caravan, great song. The Garden, absolutely love The Garden. It finishes off such a well-produced, great sounding album. There they are, they're the boys, the Holy Trinity. So good. Brilliant album. Number 14. This is where it all started for them, back in 1974. I don't know if that's a coincidence that it was the same year that I was born, but this is, of course, their debut. Another very different sounding Rush album, just because it was their first album. A little bit of a Led Zeppelin sound on this album for sure. Even Geddy's vocals, the way he was singing on this album sounds a little bit Robert Plantish at times. And this is the only album that has any other band member on it other than the 3. So this had John Rutsey on here, 1974, their debut. Finding My Way, brilliant song. In the Mood, so good. And I think a lot of people would probably know Working Man as well. Great hard rock, just a pure straight up hard rock album. Really rocking, you know, all the songs except for 2 of them, 5 minutes or under. And even then the 2 longer songs are only 7 minutes, which is kind of rare for Rush. So yeah, this is where it all started. A really good album, and this came in at number 14. I love it a lot. It's just quite different to the rest of their sound in that way, but you know, this is that important album where bands start on. Number 13. I have Grace Under Pressure. There'll be one person I know very well who might be sad at that, because I know that this is his favourite Rush album of all time. This was 1984, their 10th album. Really good song. Very much down the path of the synth rock pop era of the band. You know, good radio friendly hits in here. Quite a streamlined album. Very science fiction in its way with this album as well. Red Sector A, one of my favourite songs of theirs of all time. Great song. Yeah, Grace Under Pressure, 1984, and that was my number 13. What else? I better tell you the other things. Distant Early Warning, one of my other favourite songs on here. The Body Electric, Enemy Within, really good. Great album. Coming in at number 12. So this is the album that came out when the band got back together. It ended up being a 5-year hiatus and a 6-year gap between albums, which ended up being the longest gap between any two Rush albums. And when this was first recorded, the production was terrible. Great songs, but the production was really bad, muddy, kind of loud, but not in a good way, and just not very good at all. So if you're ever going to get this album, and this is I've got this one. Make sure if you can get the remixed version, because they went back and redid it all again at a later date, and it sounds fantastic. One of their heaviest albums, probably their heaviest hard rocking albums. Certainly brushes on heavy metal at times. This album. A very personal album, especially for Neil, because this was the album that he talks, there's quite a bit in here about the tragedy and so forth. After his daughter and wife died, he got on a motorcycle and toured all around Canada. He just went off by himself and just toured all around Canada, just with a backpack and a motorcycle. The song Ghost Rider, which is one of the best on here, that's a song all about that, all about his travels and everything. One Little Victory is a great song. Vapor Trail, so good. Earthshine, brilliant. Really hard rocking, gritty, crunchy sort of an album. Absolutely fantastic. Now, when did this come out? 2002, yeah, because it was 6 years after Test for Echo. Really, really good album. You know, it got shunned a fair bit when it first came out because the production was so bad. But once it got remixed, it's actually a really good album. Really hard rocking album. Next, number 11, Power Windows. Now, this is an interesting album for me. It has probably one of the songs on here, Territories, is easily in my top 5 Rush songs of all time. Might even be a bit higher than that. At times, it's my favourite Rush song. And so because of that song on here, it certainly drags this album quite up a lot higher. If that song wasn't on here, maybe this album would be a fair bit lower. I still like it a lot, please don't get me wrong. It's still a 9 out of 10. But Territories, the riff, the Lifeson riff that's on Territories, one of the catchiest hard rock prog songs of all time ever made. I love it. You've also got The Grand Designs, Big Money, Manhattan Project. They would be my... Oh, Mystic Rhythms as well. They'd be my other favourite songs on here. Very much part of the, as I said, the synth pop rock era of Rush. Very much so. But a great album. And as I say, with Territories on there, really pulls it up quite a fair bit. Coming in at number 10, we have the 1993 album, Counterparts. Now, for a very long time, this was my favourite Rush album post-1982. So their big golden era, most of my favourites are in that. But this, for a very long time, and I'll talk about which album took that over, but for a very long time, this was my favourite Rush album of the mid-late 80s, all of the 90s, and into some of the 2000s. A catchy album, probably maybe their catchiest album of all time. Every song on here could be a lead single and could have sold millions on its own. Animate, maybe their most radio-friendly, catchiest, brilliant chorus song of all time. Animate is just gold. The songwriting on that. So with all Rush albums, except for the first one, obviously, Neil Peart does all the lyrics, and Alex and Geddy Lee do the music, and the songwriting on here, just amazing. Animate, Stick It Out, so good. What else? My favourite, Alien Shore, one of my favourites on here. Double Agent, another one of my absolute favourites on here. Just love this. Now, this was, let me think back, this must be their 15th album, 1993. A little bit of a real good rejuvenation era of the band in here with Roll the Bones and Counterparts. They were really sort of doing pretty well again and had a real resurgence. A really great album. If you don't know that Rush album, and especially if you're not into overly progressive and long songs, that's a very good album for you, Counterparts, because yeah, it's really good. Very addictive album. One that you'll put it in the CD player of your car and it'll sit in there for 6 months. You just won't get rid of it. Now, next, number 9, Fly By Night. So this is when Neil Peart had joined the band now. His first ever song that he did the lyrics for is Beneath, Between and Behind. So that's when he had his first go at doing the lyrics, and Geddy and Alex loved it. So they said, right, you're on lyrics duty forever, we'll do the music. This album I started to hear, you could start to hear a little bit of the progressive rock coming through, Spreading the Wings. And the song that gets the credit for all that is by Tor and the Snow Dog. A fantastic, epic song, 9 minutes, almost 9 minutes long. Just a fantastic progressive rock song, just beautiful. And then Rivendale as well, which is a lot of this era. They had quite a lot of influence by the Tolkien books. So Rivendale, obviously, the elven city. So yeah, great album, absolutely fantastic. Fly By Night is my other favourite on here, the title track. This came out in 1975, and this is their second album. And number 9 on my list. Number 8. For a long time, this album was kind of maligned a little bit, and one of the reasons is it didn't sell very well when it came out. The band really was starting to go down the progressive rock in a lot of ways. So you had long songs on here, big epics, and it just didn't sell very well for that time. And they talk about that between this album and the one that came after it, not in my countdown, but in the chronological order, was the flight or fail period of Rush. So the record labels were saying, no, you've got to make more radio-friendly 4-minute songs. And then Rush after this said, you know what, this is us. This is the sort of music we love and we want to make. And of course, then after this, they came out with 2112 and really stretched it out. And luckily for them, they were genius enough to realise it would work. And it did work. And then they had big success. So it was one of a few times where a band has actually said, no, screw you, label. We're not going to conform. We're going to do what we want to do. And even if it fails, we don't care. And it actually worked. But back to this album. So this is their third album, 1975 as well. So they Fly By Night and Caress of Steel actually both came out in 1975. And my favourite songs on here are Bastille Day, very, very good. The Fountain of Lamneth, brilliant song. But the one on here that really stands out for me is the Necromancer. A big, now how long is it? 12 minutes long. So at that stage, oh, hang on, there's Fountains longer. I think Fountains might be a little bit longer. Oh yeah, Fountains is longer, but the Necromancer was the one that really let you know what this band was all about and wanted to do. And of course, the Necromancer is about Sauron, so another tribute to the Tolkien books. So good. And the way they interchange the lyrics with themselves, but put into like a Tolkien landscape and world is really clever on that song, the Necromancer. Absolutely love it. What do we got next? Coming in, so that was number 8. Coming in at number 7. So this was the album that took over from Counterparts as my favourite Rush album post 1982. I absolutely love this album. Probably overall their heaviest, and certainly does touch on heavy metal, although there's a couple of other songs here and there on some of the late 70s albums that do, but this one is very heavy. Not heavy as in its mood, but heavy as in heavy metal, hard rock. And Far Cry, probably one of their heaviest songs of all time, and one of my favourite Rush songs. So good. Starts out the album with a really head-banging song. You've also got, oh sorry, this was, oh the title is so small, 2007. So this must be their 18th album. Yes, it must be, because it's the second to last one. So this is their 18th album, 2007. On here, my other favourites, the Main Monkey Business, fantastic instrumental, really catchy instrumental song. A song that you don't need lyrics. The chorus is so well done musically that it's got a hook anyway. Spindrift and Armour and Sword, along with Far Cry. My favourite songs on here. Far Cry, one of my favourite Rush songs of all time. Love this album. Now, coming in at number 6. Now we're really starting to get into this for me. I love these last ones by a real lot. You know, they're well and truly up in the 9, easily 9 out of 10, maybe higher. This next lot, they're all at least 9.5 out of 10. So they're really not that separated at all. There's no real faults. It's just really a little tiny personal preference here and there. Maybe one of them's got a couple of more songs I like a bit more on it and favourites. But these last 6 are untouchable for me. And even, I do think Snakes and Arrow, Caress of Steel, and even Counterparts at times can knock on the door of the top 6. Counterparts, once I get playing, I do get hooked on it a bit because it's just so hooky and catchy. But realistically, these top 6 are untouchable. So, number 6, Farewell to Kings. If you're new to Rush, now this is no negative on the album, but if you're new to Rush, this one might be the hardest to digest. This one is really prog. This one is their most, I think, yeah, well, maybe Hemispheres. But this one is where they're really spread out, and I love this album. If you love prog, this is the album. And a couple of others a bit later, but this one is really good. This is where they really were in their prog rock groove. Just an amazing album. You've only got, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 6 songs on here. You've got the big Xanadu plus 10-minute song. Then, of course, you've got the ending song, which is Cygnus X1, Book 1, The Voyager, which is part of a 2-part song. The second part of it starts off the next album, which combines, so what's that? That's 20 minutes long. And then the Cygnus 1, Book 2, I think is about another 20 minutes long. So the 2 songs form a 40-minute epic all up. Magnificent album. Just a masterpiece. Genius. I just maybe don't quite reach for it as much as the next 5, because I find I have to be not exactly in the right mood for it, but it is an album that you just want to really sit down and lock into and engage, but just brilliant. That was 1977 as well. Now, I know some people, they will probably have this as their favourite Rush album. It's a very, very popular Rush album indeed. Yeah, 1980, Permanent Waves, and this was the album that symbolised them moving and combining the prog rock of before into the more accessible hard rock, pop rock stage. Still quite a hard rockin' album though, this. It's got some really good meaty guitars. And this, 1980 this came out. This is their 7th album. And I do know quite a lot of people who are big Rush fans have this as their favourite Rush album. It is magnificent. The Spirit of Radio, easily one of their best songs. Free Will, Jacob's Ladder, and I really love Natural Science. Natural Science is a really good hard rockin' song. Still 9 minutes long, but a good hard rockin' song, and a really good blend of the prog and the pop rock, and a little bit of a sign of things to come for the next decade at least for this band. So that's number 5. Number 4. The first Rush album I ever heard anything from. Passage to Bangkok, Twilight Zone, and of course the big track that opens up and takes up all of side 1 if you have it on a record. The title track 2112, which is 20 minutes long. So this was the album after Caress of Steel. They said, you know what, stuff you guys. We don't care what you want. We want to make what we want to like. If it works, it works. And if it fails, well, at least we went out doing what we loved and it worked. It actually really worked. So this came out in 1976. Of course, you got the famous logo on the back that a lot of people would see to do with Rush. Just a masterpiece. A progressive rock masterpiece that still rocks as well. This is their... we got this is their 4th album, sorry. And as I say, this is the one that started it all for me. Very, very much so. I love it. It holds a lot of sentiment for me in that way. Permanent Waves might be a little bit higher actually overall, and even A Fair Way to Kings, but the sentimental value with this one as well holds a lot, and it's you know, it's a landmark in that way because it started. It really was their coming of age. It was their blossoming album, if you like. It's when Rush really became Rush, I think. Now, number 3. I know many people, if you were to do a voting poll on what their favourite Rush album would be, this would probably win. And at times it has been my number 1. Maybe I've heard it a little bit way too much all up, and it doesn't detract anything from that, because some of the songs on here are it's the most famous Rush album. Some of the songs on here are the most famous Rush songs. There's a lot of people that may only know 1 or 2 Rush songs, and they'll know that the songs from this album came out in 1981, and of course this is their 8th album. Most people consider this their magnus opus, their masterpiece, the perfect joining of the prog rock and the catchy, accessible pop rock, hard rock, and of course I'm talking about Moving Pictures, a masterpiece. It's a flawless album. There's nothing wrong. The only reason the other 2 after this I like a little bit more is for just personal reasons, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with this album. It is an absolute masterpiece. As I say, 1981. Unfortunately, my LP copy, I don't know why. I have it on CD as well, but my LP copy, and it's 180 gram. It's all heavy. I bought it thinking I was going to get something really special for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know if anyone else has it. The sound on this is just not that great at all. It's just not clear. It's a bit muddy. And I bought it straight out of the shrink, brand new when I got it. So that's a little bit of a shame. So I'm always looking out. If I see one decent enough price, I might get another one. You probably don't need to know the songs on here. You probably all know them very well already. Of course, the Tom Sawyer, their biggest hit. It's their song that a lot of people only know. One Rush song, they'll know Tom Sawyer. YYZ, I love. Tom Sawyer, I may have heard a little bit too much these days. I still love it, don't get me wrong. I will still listen to it and play it. It's not like I skip it or anything. But YYZ, I still look for on this album. I still wait till that comes on. The great instrumental. Of course, YYZ, named after the 3-letter code for Toronto Pearson International Airport. That's where they got the title from. The really racy and fun red Barchetta were named after the car, the red Ferrari, wasn't it? The red Barchetta Ferrari. I'm not really that good on Ferrari cars, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's named after. I think one of their uncles would take them driving in, and the way the song sounds, it sounds like they're going and got the wind in the hair, and they got the top down, and it's really, really well written. Limelight, of course, is all about being on stage and the pressures of being in a famous musician in a band and being on the road, and just an absolutely perfect album. 1981, Moving Pictures, coming in at number 3. As I say, some might be a little bit surprised it's there. I'm not doing it just to be a bit contrarian, that's really where it is. These next 2, they will always almost be 1 and 2. They probably won't really switch because number 1 has 2 of my all-time favourite Rush songs on there, and that's what will probably always keep it above everything else. I love the rest of the album. So this album might never really catch 1 because unless, you know, those are songs that I love are always going to be on number 1. So, but this is, I think, their masterpiece of the prog, of the pure prog. This is the one where everything is just spot on, and it has, I think, one of the greatest progressive rock songs of all time on this album. Coming in at number 2, Hemispheres. Absolutely a masterpiece. 1978. This was their 6th album. So this came after 2112, and I said it just a minute ago. lot to think about on this video. Farewell to Kings, and this is when I think their progressive rock sound was completely, fully realised. And then after this, they went on to Permanent Waves, of course, and Moving Pictures. But this, for me, this is the point that they, in all the progressive rock era that they'd been sort of ascending to, leading up to. And this is just a masterpiece. Of course, there's actually only 4 songs on the whole album. In great prog rock fashion. You've got the sequel to the Cygnus X1 book. So this is Cygnus X1 book 2 called Hemispheres, which is a big 18-minute long epic. Circumstances, The Trees, which is one of the best Rush songs ever made. And then the one to finish it up with, La Villa Strangiato, is progressive rock royalty. It is 9 minutes of flawlessness. There are hooks. It is catchy. I'm no drummer at all. I'm not a drum technician, but for me it sounds like some of the best drumming I've ever heard on any song ever. I think Neil is just... His nickname was the Professor, and he really shows why on that track. That's the song that finishes the whole album off. Love, love, love this album. I still play it. I play it very regularly. And yeah, that's my number 2. So, if you were very clever, you may have kind of worked out what number 1 was going to be. And this might shock a little bit of people, because it is definitely into the more accessible pop rock era. This came out in 1982. And I love the whole album, don't get me wrong. The whole album to me is just magnificent. I play this album start to finish probably once a week at least. There'll be times where I play it even more regularly than that, and I've had it since its early days. I originally had it on cassette. It was very hard to get in the 80s on CD. I've since got the remastered version on CD. Coming in at number 1, my number 1 Rush album, Signals. Perfect. 10 out of 10. Absolutely 10. In fact, probably the last 6 albums are 10 out of 10. But this one just has that extra special. So my favourite 2 Rush songs, or 2 of my favourite Rush songs of all time, in fact, these might be up there as 1 and 2, is The Weapon, that riff. My goodness, the riff, that catchy chorus, but that riff is one of the greatest riffs ever made. Alex is just completely on this song, and it rocks. It's a bit of a headbanger as well. And then Subdivisions with that great synth by Geddy, incredibly catchy chorus, and I just love the song and what it's all about. You know, if you're being one of the sort of outcast kids at school, or a nerd kid, and how everyone's always trying to fit in, and the groups that you have at school, the A group and the B group, and the sports and the nerds and the you know, the teachers' pets and all the other. Just a classic song. And growing up in the 80s at school, and school was like that very much so. It's just perfect. And I remember when it came out at the time, and the music video to it, just perfect. Other favourite songs on here are Chemistry, and The Analog Kid is a brilliant song. They're all great. I love every single thing about this album. This came out in 1982. This is that would make it their 9th album. Absolutely a masterpiece. If you've never heard The Weapon or Subdivisions, please go and check it out as soon as you can, whenever you can. Those songs are fantastic. And they probably make this album always be number 1 because of the strength of those 2 songs. The rest of the album on its own would put it like in the top 3 or 4, but those 2 songs make it number 1 and my favourite. It's just, for me, I don't know if consistent is the right word, but it's the album that I just love to listen to all the way through. Never get tired of any single bit of it, and just love to bits. For me, I think it's their most complete album. It has a little bit of everything of all the eras and perfectly combined. So there we go, my number 1 Rush album. That's very close to one of my favourite non-metal albums of all time. Might even be that, or David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust is probably equal up there as well. Yeah, probably David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust would be my favourite non-metal album of all time, but that would be probably number 2. So there we go. Rush, my favourite non-metal band of all time. I've ranked the albums. That was kind of harder than I thought it would be. I knew what the bottom would be and I knew what the top would be, but the sort of probably, you know, number 3 to about number 14, you know, that was there was not much separating them, really not much separating them at all. So look, I hope you really enjoy this. I hope you did make it to the end. I know it was probably a bit of a longer video, but with 19 studio albums, I feel like it had to be given the correct amount of weight. And as I say, one of my all-time favourite bands. Just love them to bits, and yeah, rest in peace, Neil, the Professor. And yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching. I've got some more ranking and discography videos coming up, plus a new releases one coming up on sometime after this Friday. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you all soon.